Good afternoon, and welcome to Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund's Advocacy 101 webinar. My name is Jay Dick, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Partnerships here at Americans for the Arts. I'm a 50-something white gay cis man with short brown hair and a graying beard, and I'm wearing a purple shirt. I'm currently in my home office, surrounded by books and mementos that I've collected over the years. Americans for the Arts is committed to accessibility, and this includes our speakers offering visual descriptions of themselves, which makes the webinar more accessible for audience members that are blind or have low vision. Additionally, there are Zoom-generated closed captions for audience members. You can access the closed caption by selecting the CC button for closed captions in your Zoom toolbar. This webinar also includes live American Sign Language interpretations. Welcome, Emily and Michael. Which you can access with the globe icon in the Zoom toolbar. Today, we have the Q&A feature of the Zoom available for you to ask questions for our speakers throughout the webinar. We would do our best to answer all the questions, either through the Q&A feature or aloud with the presentation shared from our speakers. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you to review in the next week. You will also be able to find the slides and additional resources on our website, and we will be sharing the link now in the chat. In the event that we don't answer all the questions, please reach out to Americans for the Arts Public Policy Manager, Olivia Tarpley, so we can keep in touch. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the next few days. Today, we will cover the federal landscape of the 119th Congress. We have some special guest appearances from House Appropriations Chair, Representative Tom Cole, a Republican from Oklahoma, and the House Appropriations Ranking Member, Representative Rosa DeLauro, a Democrat from Connecticut. We will have a discussion with Lauren Flynn and David Reid of Brown Seed Hyde Farber Schreck about the Trump administration's priorities and executive orders. We will discuss the results of our policy priority survey to the field, and we'll talk about the importance of advocacy and advocacy strategies. But before we dive in, it's my pleasure to introduce one of our co-interim CEOs, Susie DeValle, for some open remarks. Susie, take it away.
Gracias, Jay. So good afternoon, buenas tardes, y gracias for attending our webinar this afternoon. Oh, I guess the video just went on. We are so very grateful so many of you are joining us today, and an extra thank you to those of you who are going to be watching this recording after January 22nd. My name is Susie Del Valle, as mentioned, and I'm a Gen X, light-skinned Caribbean woman with dark curly hair and funky glasses. My preferred pronouns are she, her, ella. And I am speaking to you from my home office in Brooklyn, New York, and my Zoom background is blurred. So on behalf of my co-interim CEO, Jamie Bennett, and the fantastic team at Americans for the Arts and Arts Action Fund, we want you to know how much we value your advocacy and partnership as we begin our shared work this year. We remain committed to our mission building, recognition, and support for the extraordinary and dynamic value of the arts. Together and collaboratively, we lead, service, and advance the diverse networks of organizations and individuals who cultivate the arts in America, ensuring that all communities, regardless of size or circumstance, have access to the transformative power of the arts. The work that you all do across the country helps to expand the power and reach of the arts and culture sector, and we can't do our work without you. So with that, the Americans for the Arts and Arts Action Fund teams continue to collaborate with members of Congress and their staff to ensure that federal funding for the arts, as well as policy to strengthen the arts community, are a priority for the 119th Congress. The webinar today will offer advocacy strategies and ways for you to make sure your voices are heard. With your help, we can continue to see support for the arts at all levels of government. We have a lot of information to share with you today, and we are thanking you for spending your afternoon with us. And with that, I'll pass it on back to Jay.
Thank you, Susie. So let's dive into our content for today. So it's my pleasure to introduce Tushar Swain. He is the Americans for the Arts Director of Public Policy, and he is going to be starting to talk a little bit about what's going on in Congress. So Tushar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tushar Swain. I am Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts. I am a middle-aged man with brown skin, Indian American. I'm wearing glasses today. I have a bald head, and my background is blurred. Again, thank you so much for joining us. The 119th Congress was sworn in on January 3rd. They're dealing with several major items right now. On the Senate side, the Senate is dealing with their advice and consent of President Trump's nominees for cabinet, for his cabinet and head of agencies. Congress is working on appropriations as well as a budget reconciliation bill, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but we'll talk about first appropriations. And Congress, as they did last year, is working kind of on a parallel track, at least they will be shortly, working still on FY25 appropriations, as well as fiscal year 2026 appropriations. Just as you may recall, as a matter of background, that the fiscal year for the federal government is typically October 1st through September 30th. So in an ideal world, we would like to see Congress have their appropriations completed and then enacted by the president by September 30th. That rarely happens, and what Congress does is that they institute a continuing resolution that funds the government at previous year levels to the certain time that they decide. And there were two of these continuing resolutions that get us to a March 14th, 2025 deadline for fiscal year 2025 appropriations. Yesterday, President Trump met with the leader of the House, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, as well as the Majority Leader of the Senate, John Thune. Appropriations was one of the things that they discussed, and we're hearing that they could be getting some top lines. Now, again, these top lines are divided into defense and non-defense appropriations. From there, the appropriations committees are given an allotment of their 12 appropriations bills. And so, for example, the National Endowment for the Arts is housed within the Department of Interior Appropriations Subcommittee bill. And so once they get those numbers, they'll be able to allocate a number for that. I mentioned that the that the due date is March 14th. If they do not pass that, and Chairman Tom Cole, who we'll be hearing from shortly, has been saying publicly he's a little bit concerned about that deadline. There's a possibility that they extend that deadline, but then they also have to keep it, I guess, in the back of their heads, the deal that was struck between then Speaker McCarthy and then President Biden that would initiate automatic precision cuts to fiscal year 2024 levels if they don't get to if they don't complete appropriations by April 30th. And so at the same time, Congress needs to get set very soon for fiscal year 2026 appropriations. President Trump was inaugurated as the 47th president on January 20th. He's required by law to submit a budget to Congress. We've heard, anywhere from late March to May that he might submit that budget. And again, they'll need to do the same thing, talking about, top lines for defense as well as non-defense spending, and then compartmentalizing those numbers into 12 appropriations bills. If they would, if they would go into regular order, they would go through sub and then full committee markups and votes, and then a House and Senate conference. But what ultimately ends up happening, at least over the course of the last several years, is an omnibus package where a big fiscal year package that Congress ultimately votes on. And I would anticipate something like that again this year. Next slide, please. And so with all of the appropriations talk, we know that the Appropriations Committee is extremely important, and we're in good hands as it pertains to the arts, because we have some very strong arts supporters in the House Appropriations Committee. Representative Tom Cole is the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, strong arts supporter. Representative Rosa DeLauro is the ranking member, has done a lot as it pertains to keep at least level or increased funding, both at the NEA and NEH, as well as for arts education programs. And then two key players in the Interior Subcommittee, the Interior Subcommittee for Appropriations, again, which houses the National Endowment for the Arts funding, National Endowment for the Humanities funding, as well as several other arts and culture programs and agencies. Representative Mike Cole has just been, or I'm sorry, Representative Mike Simpson has been just very instrumental in keeping NEA and NEH numbers on the House side at a respectable level. So then whenever the Senate comes in, their number is more justifiable because of what the House has done. And that's a lot, that has so much to do with Representative Mike Simpson, as well as the ranking member, Representative Shelley Pingree, just one of the great arts champions in all of Congress. Next slide. And then the Senate, again, the Senate Appropriations Committee will be chaired by Senator Susan Collins. She has a great working relationship with the ranking member, Patty Murray. You may recall that the Senate has flipped. So last year, Senator Murray was the chair and Senator Susan Collins was the ranking member. That flips, but that flips, but again, they have such a great working relationship. Senator Collins is a huge supporter of the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as a big arts education advocate. And then again, highlighting the Department of the Interior, which houses the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities funding. This flips as well, but Senator Lisa Murkowski and Senator Jeff Merkley, both staunch supporters of the NEA and have a great working relationship within the subcommittee of the Interior Appropriations in the Senate. Next slide. Thank you. Another aspect that I mentioned earlier that we are tracking is budget reconciliation. This allows for an expedited process for considering tax, spending, and debt limit related legislation. On the spending side, matters can only affect mandatory or entitlement spending. So think, for example, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. This is mandatory spending that is not affected by the fiscal year process that I talked to you about earlier. whenever budget reconciliation is implemented, and we have some experts who will be talking about this a little bit later, when budget reconciliation is implemented, it is not subject to the Senate filibuster. And so it only requires a simple majority in both the House and the Senate. There have been some questions about how this affects the NEA, the NEH, and the Department of Education, at least as it pertains to fiscal year spending. It cannot include those fiscal year discretionary numbers. So the NEA funding, NEH funding, Department of Education funding is subject to 60 votes. And so hopeful that we're protected by that 60 vote threshold there. Right now, it's being said that reconciliation will be used for tax reform and immigration. There is some talk about how they are going to try to how they're going to try to move those policies. Is it through one bill or two bills? Also, energy policy as a component to this as well. But for the most part, we'll be tracking tax reform and as it pertains to some provisions for individual artists as well as for the nonprofit community, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide. And so as it pertains again to tax reconciliation, the House Ways and Means Committee will begin by writing up the tax bill that again the precipice for tax reform is that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, there are expiring provisions on the corporate side as well as the individual income side that are expiring in 2025. And so the goal is to extend those provisions. But our hope again is that we can instill some nonprofit and arts provisions into that bill. Representative Jason Smith is the chair, and Representative Richard Neal, a great supporter of the arts, are ahead of those committees. Next slide. And then on the Senate Finance Committee, again, flipping from last year. Last year, Ron Wyden was the chair. He is now the ranking member, and now the chair is Mike Crapo for some of the tax issues that we will be talking about. Both have been supportive of those measures, and so we're hopeful for good things on the Senate side. Next slide. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to two of our great champions in the House on the House Appropriations Committee, Representative Tom Cole and Representative Rosa DeLauro.
That are gathered to. Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole, the 4th District of Oklahoma, and I want to, first of all, commend all of you that are gathered to express your support for the arts. As you know, that's an important part of our economy. Obviously, it enriches all of our lives individually. My own great aunt, Teata, was a world-famous performer and artist in her own right, so it's always held a special place in my heart, and particularly appreciate the federal role. It's rather modest if you look at what we do, but we do fund the arts through the Council on Humanities and a variety of other ways at the federal level. And I would urge you to reach out to your own members of Congress, certainly to me if you happen to live in the 4th District, This is a cause I've pretty consistently supported and intend to continue to support. Again, I see a few dollars going a very long way here in helping the artistic community, but more important, just enriching the lives of the average Oklahoman. So there's a federal role here. It's a historic one. We've been doing this for many, many decades in Washington, D.C., but we always would welcome your support and your comments, and particularly bringing to our attention specific programs and specific agencies that you think do a great job in this area. Helps us get our job done. So thank you. Thanks for your interest in the arts, and thanks for reaching out to our office from time to time to let us know how it's impacted your lives and the lives of our communities.
Hi, this is Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut's 3rd District. I am grateful for the opportunity to provide my thoughts to Americans for the Arts on your advocacy strategies for today's webinar. Getting legislation signed into law through Congress requires action from members of Congress, and nothing motivates members to act quite like you, the external pressure that makes change happen. That is why it is so important that you make your voices heard. You can do this in a number of ways. You can meet with your member of Congress and voice your opinions. You can write letters. You can make phone calls to their office. Or you can even write letters to the editor or opinion pieces calling for your member of Congress to act on the policy priorities that matter most to you. Regardless of how you engage, it is important that you do, especially when it comes to protecting and properly funding the National Endowment for the Arts, the NEA. At the end of the day, I believe that art is about our humanity. That is why it is so important for us to recognize at a federal level the importance of art to people, to our social bonds, and to the well-being of our world. Organizations like Americans for the Arts and the NEA are so important in reminding us of that truth, that the arts and humanities are just as essential to our country's success as physical infrastructure or tax policy. Your voice has the power to bring about powerful change and can ensure programs and services that the American people depend on are protected. Make sure you use it. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is Nina Oslu Tunjali, and I am the Chief Counsel of Government and Public Affairs at Americans for the Arts, as well as the Executive Director of the Arts Action Fund. I'm a Middle Eastern woman with dark hair and a colorful scarf, and the backdrop behind me is the Arts Vote image that was created for the Arts Action Fund by the famous Shepard Fairey. I'm here today to conduct a panel discussion with the top lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., Brownstein, Hyatt, Schreck, and joining us is a bipartisan panel with David Reid, who represents many. He's actually become a bipartisan person, but he started off as a very Democratic person. And then Lauren Flynn, who was actually part of the Trump administration in his first term, and also worked for a Republican senator, Senator Kennedy of Louisiana, working on multiple issues as a staff director. And we're so pleased to have both and get perspectives from both. And I'm very pleased to say that they are our pro bono firm on all legislative matters. Thank you for joining us, David and Lauren. Okay, so if you could unmute, I'm going to start with the first question to both of you. Tushar has laid out great legislatively what's going on, but I want to engage you all on the political side of what's happening and what might happen. I'm going to first start off with the first political action that President Trump did upon being sworn in, and that is a series of executive orders and revocations of Biden's previous executive orders. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you saw in there that has created a theme of what's going to be coming as well?
Sure. And I can start off and I'll just give my description. Again, this is David Reid. I'm a 40-year-old white man with brown hair, white shirt, and blue tie. And I'm in my office here in downtown Washington. And I'll let Lauren do a quick visual intro of herself.
Yes, and hi, Lauren Flynn. I'm a white woman with light hair. I have on a gray sweater today. I am a little under the weather, so I am working from home, and so you will see a blurred home office as my background.
Great. And to your question about the initial flurry of EOs, I think it's 30 plus executive orders that came out that the president signed shortly after his inauguration, I guess 2 days ago now, with some fanfare. I think, the first thing I think that is pretty clear is that he wanted to make sure that he was following through on a number of campaign promises. That's what we saw as, I think, an overarching theme for a number of EOs, especially with the revocation of a number of the executive actions that the previous administration had taken over those first 4 years, or over those 4 years of the Biden administration, as well as a number of issues, especially connected to immigration and some of the overarching energy policies that the administration is hoping to push through. Lauren, I think, can speak a little bit more specifically to those, but I think those are the main themes that I'm seeing and that I think we'll continue to see at least in these next few days.
Yes, David's absolutely correct. Obviously, the president declared an emergency at the southern border, and his top priority is stemming the flow at the border and protecting our national security. Also putting an end to the EV mandate. And so the executive orders that were released are a direct reflection of those campaign promises. And I think, the rest stem around social and cultural issues. I think for Trump, they're easy targets, and they're not out of step with his priorities in the first administration.
And Lauren, there were several DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity revocations that President Trump made of Biden's original executive orders promoting those things. What is the domino effect impact of that? We know it's cutting programs and staff officials who are in charge of those kinds of things. How do you see this playing out and affecting the private sector and local and state governments as well?
Well, I think, I'll just say, even before Trump took office, this was a top focus for House Republicans. So I recently joined the firm from the House Appropriations Committee working under Chairman Cole. And this was a huge priority of the House Republican Conference, was eliminating what they felt was wasteful spending within agencies. And under the Biden administration, many of these offices grew drastically in size and scope. And so I think that, the private sector has also made some changes in terms of how they're focusing and scoping these offices. And to some extent, the Trump administration may be looking to see how the private sector has transformed in that regard, but also I think the Trump administration also wants to be setting an example for the private sector. So,
yeah. And David, as you might know, arts and cultural organizations very much appreciated the DEI initiative and incorporated it a lot into their missions as well. What kind of advice would you give? Obviously, they wouldn't apply to get grants for this kind of work to the federal government. But what advice do you give them at this crossroads?
Sure. And I think that, arts organizations, cultural organizations, private sector entities, firms like ours, I think that they should continue to be true to the mission of the organization and continue to pursue the things that, are, mission critical. And I think that most would see that a diverse workforce, and, an employee base, that is representative of the community at large, leads to a more productive workforce and, positive work environment. So I think, continuing with, the initiatives that, align in that regard, is certainly what it is that we are doing. And I know a number of our clients are doing, but taking into account and understanding that the overall environment, is a little different than it was 4 years ago. And of course, looking at what the directives are coming from the administration, is certainly, a tone setter. But again, not something that I think should lead organizations and folks to, pull back entirely, because there is great value in seeing
And
that diversity
your
within the
firm
workforce.
is actually doing a great tracker on all of these executive orders and Biden revocations. Can you tell us what that is? And I think someone on our team is going to post the link for it.
Yes, please do. So we've got a terrific team of policy analysts and advisors, that are pouring through each of the executive orders as they are released and providing a quick summary as well as a quick analysis, in addition to links to where those are posted on the White House website. So feel free to take a look, and it looks like that was just posted in the chat. So as those are released, we're quickly adding those. And of course, if you have questions about particular EOs, we're happy to take a look and see what the impact might be and, what the downstream effect might be. And
Yeah.
one thing to note on those is you've got a number of EOs that are going to be pushed out that will have, either legal or other, challenges, to them. And I think this iteration of Trump, they will, I think, push the envelope, and they will put out executive actions that may very well be immediately challenged. But I don't think there is much of a concern on their end at this point. I think they're going to push it out, and then sure, maybe get tied up in courts. But again, you'll see our sort of assessment in that tracker as well, based on the feasibility of them actually being implemented.
Yeah, and I'd like to highlight to the audience a few that had a direct impact on the arts, and maybe if you want to comment. But the revoking of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, that's Biden's original executive order 14804 that you can find on your tracker. I believe yours are grouped together in that first row of the things that were revoked. So you'll be able to find 14804. And that immediately ended the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities. I'll add that every president since Ronald Reagan, which originally established the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, have reinstated that and kept it going. But we know that President Trump did not renew it once its time expired during his first term. But this one was a little bit more proactive in ending it immediately upon his taking office. Another one is regarding an executive order to put forward the more classical civic architecture instead of having ones that could also include including the nature of the community that the building is being placed in, say a post office or something like that, that incorporates elements of the community that they also serve. So that's being reversed and proactively adding more classical civic architecture, something that he did in his first term as well. So this is not something new. Something that, though, that is new, I think a lot of people have heard in the news that he wants to rename things like the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America, but also renaming many other things, including Denali Mountain in Alaska to Mount McKinley. and essentially a very positive in the sense, proactive executive order to rename, to get a list from agencies of many things that they'd like to rename in honor of American greatness. Anything that you guys would like to add to those items?
I think, I'll speak to the elimination of Papa. Again, like Lauren said, not something that was this particular one was not super surprising, given that he'd let it expire his first term. While it is, quite unfortunate not to have that community of, arts leaders as part of, the folks that are advising the administration at a high level. I think there are still many avenues by which we can get to and have those conversations and advocate, whether it be via the Hill or of course with our champions and the folks that we will be working with in the administration. So while unfortunate, I don't think that it's going to have, a terrible downstream impact on the work that we do. The other executive orders and directives, obviously the one directing, the GAO to do, to pursue architectural styles that are more in line with a classical taste and aesthetic. Again, something that he had done in the previous term. I'm not sure exactly how that is going to be, how that's going to be implemented. Lauren, you might have a better insight there. And then also the renaming of certain monuments and parks and the like. Again, not too surprising, kind of goes along with the sort of cultural tone of trying to push back on what they see as the previous agenda or the previous administration's, more woke agenda. Although I did get, a message from a cousin of mine that lives in Alaska who said and reminded that the bipartisan, Alaska delegation is very much in favor of it remaining Denali. So, I think there will also continue to be pushback on some of these renamings, but I'll let Lauren speak to it.
I think on the architectural EO, I think the priority is, and you've heard a lot about this in the news, is getting federal workers back into the office. And I think, that's where they will focus their efforts, at least in the first 100 days to 1 year even. It's, that is also going to be a big fight with the unions. But I think, there are a lot of federal agencies that have taken significant steps over the years to reduce their federal footprint and dispose of underutilized buildings. And therefore, by bringing federal workers back into those buildings, you are going to have some space issues. So I think that's going to eat up a lot of bandwidth. I'd say secondly, for federal buildings that have not been disposed of, that have been underutilized, they have significant structural issues. I think the J. Edgar Hoover building is the prime example. And so, it's one thing to say we're focused on this particular style, but yet there are, significant structural issues that have to be addressed. So that are, not as sexy to talk about. So.
And a number of these EOs are, both messaging EOs, but also ones that, align with things that Trump wants to see and hear. So another thing to be thinking.
Yeah. And I'm, a movie that came out called Brutalist is very similar to that not JFK,
Edgar Hoover building.
which, those who don't know, is the FBI building, which they are moving, right? Has that gotten confirmed?
That's a topic for another day. I will say very, very quickly, a significant amount of money has been appropriated to relocate the building, but it is ultimately going to be Trump's decision as to what he wants to do with it. Things were a little different. Things are different now than during his first term, obviously, with no longer having the Trump Hotel across the way. But we will see.
Yeah. I want to go to the Doge that will be run by Elon Musk. And as I understand it, Vivek Ramaswamy is no longer going to be, is the word co-chair, co-direct. Can you talk, Lauren, a little bit about what you know about it, how big their power is? And it will lead to also talking about, I know when Vivek was still considered to be part of DOJ, he was talking about getting rid of the Department of Education, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, two items that were very specific in Project 2025. Can you tell us also a little bit about what you know about where that's going?
So the executive order on DOJ stipulates that it will be an office inside of the executive office of the president, and that it is going to be housed within an existing office, which is called the United States Digital Service. This was an office that was created in the Obama administration to detail tech-savvy individuals into the federal government to help modernize government technology. And so the way it's been laid out in the EO is that and currently I think the digital services encompasses approximately 200 federal employees that are detailed across federal agencies. For example, I know from my time working on Appropriations that there were approximately 80 digital services individuals working inside the Department of the Treasury, including in the Internal Revenue Service. So all that being said, DOJ will detail folks inside federal agencies to help them modernize and gain efficiencies. You hear a lot about DOJ wanting to eliminate this agency or this program, but their part of the mission is also to seek to be to help agencies become more efficient. And I think consolidating duplicative programs across federal agencies will be of high importance to DOJ. So I see them having more of an advisory role, and they will report to Susie Wiles, who is Trump's chief of staff, and ultimately decisions reside within her power.
Okay, David, would you like to add anything?
No, I think Lauren, captured it. And, the other thing is, to Lauren's point about it being an advisory role, the DOJ does not have the authority to eliminate whole cloth government agencies. There are a number of processes in place in order to do that. Generally, Congress needs to be involved in those types of decisions and actions. So again, advisory role, and to be determined as to what those decisions will be, or what kinds of direction it will make via the president and the chief of staff. But they can't just go in and cut things entirely, at least in this iteration of our government structure.
Got it. Now let's talk a little bit about legislation. There is a debate going on between the House and Senate about what to put in the first reconciliation bill that will have a lot of President Trump's priorities in it. And the main one is the tax issue. We know that border and the border issues and energy are top tier issues too. I believe the House wants the tax issues included in the first reconciliation bill, but the Senate does not. Can you talk a little bit about where you think that's going?
I would say there's still no clear consensus. You hear from the Senate on wanting a two-bill approach, and their reasoning for that is so that you can help implement more of Trump's agenda in the first 100 days. So you can more quickly put forward a bill that addresses national security, securing the border, and energy policies on top of some defense funding. Obviously, there are a lot of differences inside the Republican conference about what to tweak in terms of extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And there's a lot of trading going on right now. You're hearing that Trump is wanting to talk to every member of the Republican conference to hear from them on what their priorities are. There's a lot to balance in those negotiations. And so you know, the House obviously has a very slim majority and has had a lot of difficulty in the 118th Congress passing bills on a party line vote. And quite frankly, nothing has changed going into the 119th Congress. It only, you know, obviously there's a trifecta, but there's still a lot of fractions within the House Republican Conference. And so getting everyone on the same page is a taller order in the House. And so for that reason, Speaker Johnson has advocated for a one bill approach. I'll say this, they have to figure it out before they pass the budget resolution, because the budget resolution lays out the instructions to the relevant committees of jurisdiction on what they need to do in a reconciliation bill. So if the reconciliation bill is going to increase spending and they're only going to do one bill, then that bill has to address both taxes and Trump's other top policy priorities.
Lauren, when you're referring to the budget bill, is that for FY26?
So so separate from appropriations, because as we heard earlier from Tushar, discretionary appropriations is not addressed via reconciliation.
Okay.
So Republicans have a couple shots at this, because a budget resolution was not passed for 2025. So they can begin with a 2025 budget resolution that lays out instructions for the types of reconciliation bills that they can put forward. And then later on, they can do a 2026 budget resolution. And even after that, they can do a 2027 budget resolution.
Okay. I'm going to come to you, David, in a moment. I just want to follow up with Lauren a little bit more to ask. So the omnibus bill for FY25 was pretty much negotiated and a done deal in December of last year. But President-elect Trump really wanted to have that bill be carried over to the first quarter, now March 14th, 2025. There's an assumption that they want to make some kind of big imprint on that FY25 bill. Do you have any indication of what those things might be? Are they rescissions? Because by the time they pass that by March 14th, if that sticks, that deadline, 6 months of the year has already passed, and puts federal agencies, everything from the NEA to the Department of Defense, I think, in a weird position where 6 months have gone by and now there are cuts inside the bill that they've been working off as level funding.
So I'll make 2 points of clarification. So predating Trump coming into office, so the appropriators had not begun discussions on an omnibus package. They were pretty much waiting for direction on what the top line allocation may be so that they can then begin those negotiations. So really no progress had been made on any sort of omnibus package prior to the start of the 119th Congress. And you'll remember that the FY24 appropriations process was also very late, 6 months into the fiscal year, having been passed in the middle of last March. Now, on the cuts, I you know, I think there is uncertainty. The House and Senate bills are worlds apart, and they were before Trump took office. And so that is an issue that they have to resolve. It sounds like they're currently talking about, you know, they're trading offers. At least the Republicans have made an offer to the Dems, and you know, they need to be on the same page, and they need to have that level blessed by leadership in order for the committee and the subcommittees respectively to carry out that work. So they've still got a ways to go. And, you know, they're still operating under the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which lays out the caps for defense and non-defense spending. And I think while cuts are still likely in 25, you're probably going to see greater cuts going into 26.
Yeah. David, would you like to add some commentary?
No, I mean, Lauren captured it pretty well, just with where the process was, where it is now. And I agree, you know, I think the advocacy is incredibly important now. Obviously, as we go into the final stretches of what I'm hoping is an omnibus negotiated deal, that you know, takes us through the March 14th deadline. But all that much more important to, you know, get in front of those offices and make the case for the continued and increased funding for what it is that we care about, NEA and NEH funding for FY26. And, you know, continuing to make the economic impact case, you know, the on the ground district case for these dollars. And as Chairman Cole said, you know, seeing these limited, you know, for all intents and purposes, small investments yield a great deal of return.
Yeah. So Lauren, where I had gotten that information about they had already done a deal is actually from Chairman Cole himself. So I must have misunderstood something or got something confused. But he said he had already been negotiating with the Four Corners, Senate and House.
Okay.
Okay, so I've been also looking at the Q&As inside our box here to incorporate questions as we move along. I can tell you that a lot of people are very concerned about the DEI changes, very much so, both people who work in the federal government and also programs and other policies being changed. I think we've shared what we know on that topic, but I just wanted to acknowledge to the audience that I hear what you're saying and I wanted to uplift it. There is a question about, and you used to work at Treasury, I know, Lauren, is what is the status of the bills? So they're not laws that were passed, but bills supporting the Treasury, giving the Treasury Department authority to actually strip away tax exempt status from nonprofits if they claim that the organization is supporting terrorism at the same time. And then it leaves up to a question of what is terrorism? And I think there's executive orders that might have even dealt with terrorism issues. Do you know anything about that have legs?
So this was actually a provision that was carried in the appropriations bill I worked on, but I thought that there was perhaps standalone legislation that had been voted on regarding excluding this status. I'm not sure what the latest is. I don't believe that was signed into law. So I would, yeah, unless new standalone legislation has been introduced to do so, or you know, we certainly haven't seen any action come out of the Treasury Department since 2 days ago.
And you mentioned,
but I do think it is
go ahead.
It's top of mind for the administration.
To be able to give Treasury Department that authority. I guess people are concerned about the Treasury Department being able to decide that unilaterally. as opposed to going
Administratively through Congress.
administratively, yeah.
Sure.
When you worked on that bill that did have it included, is this a minority voice of, in terms of quantity, minority voice of members who want this, or is the GOP caucus pretty much, very much behind this?
So the GOP was supportive of including that provision in an appropriations bill that funded the Department of Treasury.
Okay. And then, David, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Nope, nothing out on that one.
Okay. So I am going to now hand this back to Jay, and hold on, I just want to make sure I got the right. I'm sorry, to Shar, to discuss some more issues. So thank you for this. We will have a bigger Q&A afterwards, and if you are available, please hang on. Go ahead, Tushar.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you so much to Lauren and David. Your expertise is invaluable, and thank you, Nina, for your all arts, everything expertise. Americans for the Arts earlier this month, we shared a survey with the field to gain insights into advocacy and priorities, understanding that we all do this together as national partners, as state partners, local partners, and as individual constituents of members of Congress. We had nearly 900 responses, and we focused on 3 areas just based on what we know, what David and Lauren had been talking about. We two very important, 2 very distinct issues that we know will be up for debate: funding and tax. And then we also wanted to include some other arts-focused policy issues to see what's top of mind to the field. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we will be releasing more information on the poll over the next, or on the survey over the next couple of weeks, but here are just some top lines as it pertains to appropriations and funding priorities. There's no surprise that the National Endowment for the Arts is at the top of that list. It's obviously very important issue, as we've seen in the chat. Arts education, which is always a top tier issue as it pertains to funding. And then the Corporation for Broadcast Funding, or Corporation for Public Broadcasting funding, also was a top tier issue. And I think this speaks to the political acumen of the arts community, understanding that it has been a target by the Department of Government Efficiency, or the DOGE, that is being led by Elon Musk, that Nina, Lauren, and David alluded to earlier. On the tax side, nonprofit tax credits, the non-itemizer deduction for charitable giving, and deducting and allowing artists to deduct business expenses were the top 3 issues. We'll talk about the non-itemizer deduction and deductions for artist business expenses shortly. The nonprofit tax credit stems from the idea that nonprofits are businesses. They do pay taxes. They pay taxes. Well, first of all, that if you include the entire nonprofit sector, they are the 3rd largest workforce in our country. They do pay an estimated $65 billion in payroll taxes, but they don't get the benefits to that corporations get, that they lower their effective tax rate. And so then the question becomes, are there models that are there models where you can provide tax credit relief to their payroll taxes, such as the child care or the employer child care tax credit, or the tax credit for paid leave. Those are issues that are top of mind to the nonprofit community, as well as the nonprofit arts community. And then other issues, artificial intelligence, how to deal with the protection of human creation, how to deal with copyright of an artist's creation. Arts and mental health, as well as community arts engagement. We hear you, and we advocate for those issues. And then disaster preparedness and relief, understanding that the nonprofit arts community joins the entire nonprofit community whenever there is a disaster, looking ways for help, looking for incentives that the federal government can give, as well as federal aid, which is incredibly important as we continue to think about those who are affected by these disasters across the country. Next slide. And so with that, you heard both Lauren and David talk about what the what the landscape is, and in appropriations, and how the House and the Senate are far apart, but they continued to negotiate. And we're not going to know where we stand on some of these advocacy asks until we get what those top lines are. But whenever we had our fly-in in December, some of those champions that I mentioned to you earlier in this webinar told us, for this moment to proceed with, with your funding asks, which reflect what the Senate did last year in the appropriations bills that they they passed. And so, for example, the Senate passed appropriations, or at least the Appropriations Committee passed legislation that would increase the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities funding to $209 million. That would be a $2 million increase from last year. The Assistance for Arts Education program. This is a model education program. It's a competitive grant program with the goal of funding innovative arts education programs, as well as professional development that others can use as a model to institute in their own arts education programs. The Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the latest version of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, has well-rounded funding programs found in Titles I, Titles II, and Title IV. And the Senate increases all of those programs by a modest amount. And then we talked a little bit about within the survey, community arts engagement. Last year, the arts community successfully advocated for community arts engagement at the Department of Defense's Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. And so trying to create a program that the local morale, welfare, and recreation offices of the Department of Defense team up with local arts agencies in that area to provide and offer arts programs for our active military. There's $5 million right now line itemed in the Department of Defense bill. The Department of Defense, the House's version of the Department of Defense Appropriations bill. And that's something that we continue to advocate for. And again, Corporation for Broadcast, for public broadcasting funding is at $535 million at this, which is the Senate number. Special thanks to our friends at the Public Broadcasting Service, who we get guidance from on how to advocate for this incredibly important program. Next slide. Talked a little bit again about tax reconciliation and what that potentially looks like from our deductions as from based on meetings that we've had over the course of the last 6 months. The most politically viable proposals that we see having a chance to be included in a tax reconciliation bill, understanding that, that again, these tax bills will be, or this tax bill will be written to first and foremost to extend the expiring provisions in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. But beyond that, we're hopeful that these two provisions are reinstating the non-itemizer deduction for charitable contributions for those, again, who do not itemize on their taxes, which due to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which increased the standard deduction, now only 7% do not or only 7% of Americans do not itemize on their taxes, and so they lose that incentive. And so we're trying to reinstate that. Very important for those small donations as well. And then the Performing Artists Tax Parity Act, which raises the qualified performing artist deductions from incomes of less than $16,000 to incomes less than $100,000. This was part of the 1986 Reagan tax bill, which hasn't been adjusted for inflation or cost of living. And so trying to make this an effective policy for middle income artists. Next slide. And this slide just indicates that these are a lot of the issues that the arts community is thinking about based on our survey: administration, local arts, public arts, community, how arts affect children. Just a special thank you for all of those, to all of those folks who completed the survey. Your input is incredibly invaluable to us, and we are looking forward to our continued work together. Next slide. All right, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Olivia.
Thank you, Tushar. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivia Tarpley, and I'm the Public Policy Manager at Americans for the Arts. I'm a white woman with dark brown hair wearing a cream-colored blouse, and I'm seated in my home office based in Washington, D.C., with a piece of art hanging on the wall behind me. So as this is our Advocacy 101 webinar, today I'm going to share some initial advocacy strategies and tips, along with arts messaging in the new political climate. We will have more educational opportunities over the course of this year for you to keep advocating and learning with us. And please know that this is not an exhaustive list of the actions that you can take. There are lots of important questions and comments that have been shared in the Q&A and the chat. So we hope that you all will keep the conversation going with us so that we can be responsive to your concerns and needs. We are always happy to collaborate and take action in tandem with you all and others across the field. So when advocating, share your story and be authentic. Each of you are the experts about your respective work and in terms of what's going on in your communities. And as we've heard from the members of Congress earlier, they want to hear from you about how programs and policies are impacting the community. One of the best ways that you all can amplify your advocacy is by creating coalitions and working with partners across the sector. So kind of what we're doing today. Consider also cross-sector partnerships as ways to build even more impactful coalitions. And when building these different coalitions and relationships, think about all of the people that have a stake in the issues that you're advocating for. This will likely include grassroots activities and working with grass tops, like a big name artist or another influential community figure. You can also consider partnering with businesses, lobbyists, and other state and local organizations to spread your message. As part of your advocacy work, make sure to share local success stories and pair these stories with data to make your advocacy more powerful. Policy and decision makers appreciate the data to back up the message that you're sharing with them. One resource that we have available to you all is our most recent economic impact data on nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences. This is our AEP6 data, and in 2022, we found that nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences generated $151.7 billion in economic activity. The Bureau of Economic Analysis also conducts research on the arts, which you can use to back up your message. Some members of Congress and policymakers like to hear about the return on investment of the arts, and others like to hear about the value it adds to communities. So make sure that you're tailoring your message and your examples to the people that you're talking to. It's also valuable to include examples of success that show what you're advocating for will make a difference. And if there hasn't been an exact success yet, you can share lessons learned from previous attempts to show that progress is being made. Make sure that you're building relationships with your members of Congress and their staff. Not only is it important to have the rapport with the members, but their staff help to move issues along and ensure that your member is addressing your concerns. Additionally, you never know where a staffer might end up later in their career. Sometimes they become a member of Congress themselves. The last tip I want to share is about messaging. So make sure that you're developing unified messaging that you can share with coalitions and partners so that all of your asks are clear to elected officials. And this applies to any advocacy work you're doing. So just consider the following 3 questions. Who is the audience for the message? Who is delivering the message and how is it being delivered? And when to follow up. So craft your message with these things in mind to ensure that it will resonate with your audience. So this leads me into our next slide, specifically about arts messaging in the new political climate. So as is always the case with advocacy and messaging, stay true to the values and needs of your stakeholders and community. With the changes in the federal government, you can consider leading with how the arts in your communities have a tangible economic impact and contribute to the local economy. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the resources from Americans for the Arts that you can use to make your case is our Arts and Economic Prosperity data. This can also help to emphasize the point that nonprofit arts and culture organizations are small businesses. So we encourage you to use this as a messaging point over the next 4 years. The new administration will have a specific focus on the United States 250th anniversary coming up in 2026, and this is an opportunity to share arts and cultural projects that celebrate the country's history. Additional opportunities to expand and message your work are by emphasizing initiatives in rural areas and considering ways to reach more parts of rural America through new arts and culture programs. Similarly, you can bring attention to any arts projects that reach military and veterans families. So now that we've talked about the advocacy strategies, and some messaging. Again, we recognize this list was not exhaustive, but we do want to share something with you all that you can do today to kick your 2025 off with some advocacy. Americans for the Arts and the Arts Action Fund make it very easy for you to write to your members of Congress. We use a grassroots advocacy platform called Quorum so that you can reach out to your senators and representatives. Some of you may have previously engaged with us on our platform called Voter Voice. This Quorum is new, but it has the same functionality and the same impact. So we will be putting the link to the action alert in the chat here shortly, and I encourage you all to write to your elected officials today. We cannot do this important work without you, and we appreciate the time and energy that you all dedicate to advocating for the arts in your community. So now I'm going to welcome my colleague Jay back, and I believe the rest of our speakers for some additional question and answer time.
Thanks, Olivia. I invite all of our speakers to turn back on their cameras. And so we have about 10 minutes here to answer different questions. And I've been typing away. We all have been typing away on some of the questions. So again, Tushar, Nina, Lauren, David, if you're still with us, please come on and we'll get you a spotlight. So the first question that we've been seeing over and over again is this overall concern about DEI programs, policies. And part of the question is, we know that the federal government is saying no to this now under President Trump. But on the other side, what concerns should local or state arts groups have who maybe do have a DEI program themselves? Do they need to get rid of their DEI program, or can they still get grants from the NEA around other things? So I think that's one of our biggest concerns is DEI programs and how to make sure that our morals aren't compromised here. Any thoughts on that? On what a local arts agency should do who has a DEI program?
I think they should continue their DEI program and stay true to their mission and what their community is expecting from them. The NEA may no longer be a great source for a grant to expand your DEI program, deepen your DEI program, but you might have other programs where DEI is a component of it. That might work. But I think you should be looking at some foundations and corporations that are actually stepping up to fill that DEI role with some grant making. Maybe not all. Some, like Facebook, are reversing their positions on DEI. So we all have to do our research to figure that out, but keep doing it.
Thank you, Nina. One of our other questions we had was, we're in novel times. Is there any novel forms of advocacy that we will be doing that we know of? The suggestion was going on Fox News, and I know our former CEO has done that in the past. But any thoughts from anyone on any novel stuff that's going on, or any things that we've been having?
Happy to share quickly that at Americans for the Arts, one of our advocacy programs is what we call a Zoom In week. So we would encourage you all to get in touch with us to make sure that you can participate in the Zoom In week. That's going to happen in the latter half of this year. But I think that, it is the time to be creative and also to work together on ways to advocate. And so, Nina, I don't know if you had anything to add to that as well.
I do, but I saw Lauren come back on, and I think she might be one of the best people to respond to that question if you didn't hear it. And that is, in these new political times, GOP majority, what are some more novel things that the arts community can do to advocate for the arts and have the message be heard?
Well, I think you can send your message through, I still refer to it as Twitter, but that seems to be the go-to these days. And to the extent you can share your videos, I know that is appreciated by members of Congress as well.
And specifically, Lauren, is it by tagging Elon Musk, by tagging the White House, when we're on Twitter to try to get their attention?
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair game. I have to admit, I don't do any tweeting myself, so
But we know it works.
yes, but you see that it works.
Perfect. I did see another question here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I
Nina, do you
just
have a
add
follow-up?
something? We personally, I worked through the whole Trump administration at Americans for the Arts, and that's where Brownstein first came in to help us. So looking around your community of those kinds of colleagues who work in a bipartisan way, I think is really important, because it's not just the message, it's the messenger as well. So that's very important. And then during that first Trump administration, where 4 years in a row, President Trump recommended zeroing out funding for the NEA and NEH, I'm really pleased to say that a bipartisan Congress, and in the first 2 years, as I recall, it was GOP controlled in both the House and Senate, trifecta again, as I recall. And we were able to actually increase funding for their budgets during those years. So we're focusing in on Congress to really help us. We don't know if President Trump is still going to recommend zeroing it out. I don't know. It hasn't been spoken yet. I can say that though. But we've already been lining up a lot of our Republican leaders to help us.
That leads actually to another question to Cheryl. I'll throw this question towards you. There are multiple arts related caucuses on Capitol Hill. Are they important? Should people be encouraging their members to sign up for these caucuses, and what can they be doing to help?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. They are very important. I'll start, I guess, with the Arts Caucus, in that we have a new co-chair of the Arts Caucus, joining Representative Shelley Pingree, who I mentioned earlier is one of the most staunch arts supporters that we have. But joining her will be Representative Mike Turner, who represents the district that contains Dayton, Ohio. He's been a huge arts advocate, and I think one of the things that they have spoken to us and to others about is really trying to utilize the caucus for for things like policy events, whether it be for staff or for members, really trying to highlight the work that the arts community does, as well as the policies that are very helpful to the arts. And the other caucuses remain very relevant too as well. I think one I saw a question there about the STEAM caucus, and Representative Bonamici has been just hugely successful. She actually was able to get a STEAM provision in the tech bill that passed a couple of years ago. And then STEM obviously STEAM has a very important component in early childhood, which is something that Republicans and Democrats might disagree on how to get there, but something that they're both highly interested in. Nina, you're very much an expert on this. Do you have anything to add to that?
Okay, you're muted though.
Sorry, I was trying to mute it from my picture rather than the apparatus there. No, you did a great job. Thank you.
Well, Nina, here's a question though that you might have a great thought on too. We really appreciate the suggestion to reframe the arts and culture in the creative economy standpoint, and referring to artists and arts organizations as small businesses. Do you have any examples of where this has really worked out well?
Yes, the Small Business Administration. We've worked years to try to get them to understand that nonprofits are also small businesses. They got it in big way with shuttered venue operator grants, also with the paycheck protection, which Lauren, I know you worked on at Treasury, right? I'd love to know what your thoughts are on positioning arts organizations that are nonprofit as small businesses, and not just nonprofits. So they're contributing to the economy too.
Yeah, I mean, I think through the Small Business Administration's entrepreneurial development programs, there are a lot of opportunities for those partnerships to be had, particularly for programs that are aligned with universities. So would certainly encourage you to identify and try to establish those connections.
Thank you, Lauren. So we have one more question, but it goes right into our next little group talk here. What is the link for Americans for the Arts messaging page? How can we message our Congress people? Olivia, you're going to talk about that to the rest of my speakers. Thank you so much for being part of it. Part of this, we really appreciate you. And I will turn it over to Olivia to talk about what you can do to talk to your members of Congress.
Excellent. Thanks, Jay. So, folks, I'm putting into the chat right now our action alert, which we encourage you to do today. This will, as you input your information, it will give you your list of elected officials and allow you to very easily write to them to encourage them to support specific funding levels that we've talked about today. You'll also be able to customize the message to share any specific stories or concerns that you have. So we really encourage you to do this as a start. And like I mentioned earlier, we will have lots of opportunities for you to engage and to continue to learn and advocate with us throughout the year. The final thing that I want to share with everyone is that we are also excited and gearing up for our Americans for the Arts convention in 2025. We are really excited about our time coming up in Cincinnati and hope that you all might join us there. I've put the link in the chat as well. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We would love to see you there. And with that, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you all again so much for sharing your time with us, and please keep in touch in the coming weeks. Take care.